Hello, it's great to greet you because today we have a special guest, Irma Aronson, who is here and is now 96, I believe, and she lived at the site of where the Westborough High School is. And today, Irma is going to tell us my Westborough story, her memories, which are very rich, about growing up and living in Westborough. So, greetings, Irma. Glad you're here.
It's a pleasure to come.
What I'd like you to do first, perhaps, is tell us where you were born and then how you got to Westborough.
Well, I was born in Boston and lived there for a few years. I don't remember when we came, but my family came. All the 5 brothers came to Westborough.
These are Aronson brothers.
These are all Aronson brothers, 5.
Mm-hmm.
And they came to be farmers. How they were farmers, I don't know, because at one time I did ask relatives, and they were chicken farmers in someplace else. Mm-hmm. But somehow these 5 brothers got to get a farm in Westborough. Unfortunately, I don't know when or how, but they did have the cattle.
Right, and it wasn't just raising cattle, they auctioned them, is that right?
The youngest brother, Uncle Charlie, who I adored, would go out west and get the cattle and put them on the trains.
Oh.
And then the most wonderful thing happened. In order to get them to the farm, they had to get them off the trains, go through the town with beautiful elm trees on the side, and they would bring them up through the town. And I remember as a kid going and watching them bring them to the farm. There would be like 4 or 5, and they would bring them up. They would have the staff. Well, the hired hands is what you called them those days. Mm-hmm. You didn't call them staff. And they were on either side getting them into the farm. And the farm had a nice long driveway getting into the farm. Great. It was a big farm.
Mm-hmm. So they actually drove the cattle up Main Street?
Yes.
From the train station?
Yes.
Oh, felt like the Wild West.
Exactly.
Wild Westborough instead.
Exactly. I don't know how many times a year they did that. I have no idea. The barn was big, mm-hmm. and this was before they had electric supplies to put in the barn. So everything was done by hand, milking the cows. It was fun to see. And as a kid, I walked in, and they were milking the cows. They'd squirt the milk right into the cats would sit up and go like this, and then squirt the milk right into cats' mouths. It was fun. We used to have a lot of fun.
Sure. Now, you told me that you lived in what was called the Whitney Estate. In any case, I know it was a great, huge house, and I had read that it was built by Christopher Whitney, but it was the Whitney family, obviously, who built it.
And Eli Whitney came to visit.
Great.
And yes. he then settled in Westborough for a little while.
What was the house like? And did you live in the house?
The house was like fantasy land because it was a huge house, sort of an oval shape, big shape. And on the outside, the piazza was very wide. And it also had, we were so surprised, a ballroom, a beautiful, big, huge room they called the ballroom. Mm-hmm. And there were small little rooms where my mother and father had, my sister was 2.5 years younger than I, and so we were there.
Did you have just one sister or in your family?
Yes.
Yes. And this, what was called long ago, the Whitney estate, had sort of a Victorian with 2 stories, I believe.
Yes.
So there are
Yes.
lots of places to play and find. But did you actually live there, Irma, or?
We lived in that house for a year or 2. I don't remember exactly how long. That was my problem. Because then we moved away.
I see.
My father bought a house. Only Uncle Eddie had the big house on the farm. And actually, a fun story about that is right beside Uncle Eddie and Aunt Sadie's house was a cornfield. And they would use that for feed as well. But the cornfield was pretty close. I'll tell you a fun thing. I had to babysit my sister one time, and I did have to go to the bathroom, left her. When I came out, she wasn't in the carriage.
Oh, dear.
And she crawled. And they called for help to find my sister. And they finally found her by going up and down the cornfields.
Up and down the rows.
The rows. And she fell asleep on a, I have no idea. It was a large cornfield.
Oh, that must have been frightening to lose a
But
sister in a cornfield.
And I remember standing there seeing all the people walk up the driveway coming to help.
That, yeah, people helped each other, didn't they? in
They
those days?
really did.
And there were farms all around you. It wasn't
Yes.
built up.
Yes.
It was big farms or small
It was
farms.
big farms. And this farm was a large farm. It had loads of fields where the cattle, of course, ate. But and they would sometimes put the cattle in different areas of the fields.
I see.
So we as kids could go on the farmland and dig and play. And that's where we found those Indian artifacts.
Now, what were they? And were you
I
just
can
in grade school at that point and just having a good time
Exactly.
outdoors? Okay.
And I can remember the triangular shape of the spear. They had funny edges. And we used to use them as scoopers to dig.
Oh, wow.
We had a great time.
Sure, I can understand that.
Yeah.
But probably playing with very wonderful artifacts that we'd like to have now, I'm sure. And Irma, when you were a little girl, did you actually see the auctions? You know, were you
I saw a lot of
some?
I saw a lot of people
Okay.
because there were a lot of buildings on the farm.
Oh.
We had the milk house. We had the chicken house.
Oh, yes.
And and upstairs they would have different things in all these houses. For my 16th birthday, I got a dove.
Oh, how lovely.
And they put the dove in the chicken house.
Oh, goodness.
So
Oh, a beautiful dove in the middle of the chickens.
Oh, they were
But
beautiful.
as you were saying, your family had been chicken farmers, so that felt easy and comfortable to them.
Exactly.
And then I wanted to emphasize again that this was on the site of the high school, right on West Main Street where the high school is now. So it's a pretty famous spot
and
in town.
I did go to look at the high school, and it didn't look anything like the farm, the whole area. I was overwhelmed when I came. I think how many years ago I came. I was so overwhelmed with what Westborough looked like. It was a population of 5,000
Oh, my.
when I grew up. And people, it was a sweet, lovely, wonderful town. And people retired here because it was so
Oh.
beautiful.
How nice. I was thinking of people living in Westborough and then retiring to Florida. Instead, they would retire to Westborough.
Here, because it was charming. It was a charming community. It had 2 theaters, not a movie theater, but a summer theater.
The
With
Red Barn.
acting,
Yeah.
the Red Barn, and then Town Hall had a summer theater also.
How nice. It would be great to have live theater in Westborough again.
Great.
I think
We had a movie house that was, the kids, we used to go every Saturday to movies.
And where was that?
And that
Was that the Strand?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It was 10 cents to go. We had to really work for that 10 cents, my mother, so would go. And and it would be couples. I mean, boys and girls would go. That was the big thing on Saturdays, what to do.
And where was it, Irma? Right downtown?
Yes. And it was right down, it was one of the side streets.
Milk Street or
I don't
South
remember.
Street?
And also downtown, another place where all the kids used to go was Blois
Drugstore.
And Blois's had little seats, not seats, little stools.
Yeah.
And we could get ice cream there.
Nice. And sodas, perhaps?
And sodas.
Yeah.
I mean, in those days, drugstores, that's what a drugstore was.
Right.
Had a little pharmacy, but mostly that's where we would get together.
Kind of hang out.
Hang on. It was, and Mr. Blois was wonderful.
Very nice.
That's what was nice about this town. Everybody was kind, thoughtful. It was great.
And your families knew each other as well, and they
Yes.
knew you. And you.
So we really stayed within our own families because my Uncle Manuel was married and had kids. My father did. His name was Harry. Uncle Eddie was the eldest. And I said, and Uncle Abe, who was not married.
Oh.
So there were two who were not married. And I adored Uncle Abe, and I adored Uncle Charlie. And Uncle Charlie was lost in the tornado.
Yeah, that was the disaster, and so sad, particularly for your family.
Oh.
How old were you then, and where were you?
I
This
was
is June 9th, 1953.
53.
Right.
And I was,
What do you remember?
well, the way we remembered it is because one of the hired hands did not go with my Uncle Charlie. My Uncle Charlie knew about tornadoes because he went out west. And he had been not in one, but saw one. Because I remember his coming home from it and telling us about it. And he knew the spires and everything. So
The
somehow,
funnel kind of thing.
yes,
yeah.
the funnel or whatever it's called. And he was with, for some reason, he was with the two hired hands, and he said, I see a tornado coming. And the reason I know this is, accordingly, at the funeral, this hired hand told the story to everybody at the funeral because everybody was lost. And the way it happened was Uncle Charlie said, you guys go to the basement because there's a tornado coming. I'm going into the house to tell Aunt Sadie, who was Ed's wife, and youngster. So there was Sadie, and so there were two hired hands, but one of the hired hands didn't go in the basement and ran after Uncle Charlie. And the minute they opened the door, according to the other hired hand, who came out of the basement but didn't go up the hill, he told the story that the minute Uncle Charlie and the other hired hand, and his name was, now that I can remember, his name was Norman. I'll never forget that. I just remembered that.
Good.
So Norman went into, because he used to babysit for me once in a while. They went into the door, and when they opened the door, that's when really it hit and blew them out into the pasture. And Uncle Eddie used to go and get antiques, and they would find whole antiques as well as broken things.
All over the pasture from the winds.
Now, whether they found bodies, I have no idea, because I was not there. And the hired hand didn't say anything like that at the funeral. It was just disastrous.
How many people died?
Four.
4 people. They were your uncle?
My uncle Charlie, his sister-in-law, Aunt Sadie,
Okay.
Beatrice, and Beatrice, Sadie's daughter, or my cousin.
And
they hired hand, Norman.
Goodness. So 4 people lost their lives in the tornado. But what happened to the house, though?
Well, we lived across the street from the golf course, and it was up on a little hill. And my mother was going to sell the house 3 days later.
Oh, wow.
And it picked the house up. It was a 2-story house, and brought it down to the main street. Just picked it up. We went back to look at it.
Oh, my goodness. No one was in it at the time? Oh, that's wonderful.
Because she was going to sell it.
Goodness. Well,
I know.
mean, I can't even imagine how devastating and frightening
It was for everybody. Even the hotel. It was, and it's interesting, in Westborough, though the Aronson's property were the only ones that blew up.
Oh, my.
I know.
Although I know that Bob Harvey's house was also damaged and picked up.
Yes.
So there were some pretty
and that I don't remember.
Yeah.
So.
But your devastation at the Aronson's farm was one of the most dramatic.
Yes.
And I think the only one in which people were killed.
Right.
And it was just such a tragedy.
It was.
But it seems that, were you actually living here at that time?
No, I was at college and came out of college. And I remember I was out at some function outside because there were a whole bunch of people. We were watching a stage play. We went to some college or something to see a summer stage play. And when we came home, I heard on the radio that had happened. It was horrible. It was really bad.
Can you tell me, well, what we were talking about downtown and what it looked like. Can you tell me what schools you went to and what progression? Because that changes all the time.
You mean in Westborough?
In Westborough.
Well, behind.
Where did you start, for instance? What grade?
It was like 6th grade or 5th grade, something, because it was a school behind the high school.
That was the Harvey School.
Yes.
Yes. And, but there was also an Eli Whitney School. So the oldest one was the small Harvey School, which was brick, and that was built in the 1880s by Dr. Harvey. But then that was on Phillips Street. And then next in front of that, on Grove Street, the Eli Whitney School was built in 1920s
I don't remember
or
that.
so. And then the Forbes High School was built in 1929. So, and then there was the Armstrong School.
But I'm 1927 grow up.
Right, so you're only 2 when they built the high school.
I was only 2.
But when you came here to go to school, you think you remember going to the Harvey School? Or Eli Whitney School?
Well, I remember the kids. I remember Louise McDonald was in the Harvey School with me because she lived around there. Because later on in life we went to, the reason I'm thinking is that I had to work myself through college. My father was a farmer, and
where did you go to school?
Well, initially
in college.
Initially, I went to Clark University, and then to Tufts. But I went to those 2 schools because of the art teacher in high school.
Oh.
The art teacher in high school was called, her name was Mrs. Ling, Her husband was Chinese.
Oh, like Ling, L-I-N-G?
Yes, something like this.
Okay.
I don't remember how they spelled it. Mm-hmm. Because he had to carry her into school. I can remember her carrying her up a few steps. And the reason I say that is because she was handicapped, of course.
Oh.
And there were a group of us teenage kids that really loved her. She was a warm and interesting teacher, and she really was interested in teaching
art.
and teaching us. And we used to stay after school, and she'd have conversations with us, and we loved it. She talked about her disability, etc. So we all wanted to be doctors. We decided to be doctors.
Oh, how wonderful to help Mrs. Ling's other
Exactly.
people.
So, but when I learned I had to take organic chemistry and physics and stuff to get into medical school, I decided, oh, Mrs. Ling, I can't be a doctor. And she said to me, then you should be an occupational therapist.
My goodness.
And I said, great. Went home, told my mother said, what is an occupational therapist? I said, I don't know, but Mrs. Ling told me.
That's great.
And whatever she tells me, I'll do.
Did you?
And I did.
Good for you.
That's how I went to Clark University and Tufts, that's why. And Boston School of Occupational Therapy. So in those days, you had to do 5 years because we did a year of internships. But that's how I got into occupational therapy.
Good,
because of wonderful
her.
Mrs. Ling.
Did she ever tell you about China at all?
No, because we didn't discuss where she was from. Or her husband then, once he brought her into school, he went back into the car. So
it
I
wasn't
never
a discussion.
Yeah, he was never in the discussions, or did she relate to us about her family or anything.
Right. You went to high school, you think, at the Forbes building right on West Main Street?
Oh, yes, I know.
Okay. So when you were there, what was it like? How did you have fun? What teachers do you remember? What classes? I was told or read that it was the first school that had an auditorium, a cafeteria, and a gymnasium in Westborough.
The gymnasium was wonderful. Because there are a few stories I could tell you. I don't know whether it was every 3 weeks or every month. There, on Friday nights, the teachers or whoever set it up, we had dancing school, very special dancing school. And all the kids loved it. We learned how to waltz, we learned how to do foxtrot, all that. It was very prim and very proper.
Who were the teachers or the teacher?
I don't remember. They had a teacher come in for that. And then after that, it was a little too staid for all of us. And we would run down to the Grange Hall, downtown Westborough.
On Milk Street, I believe? Yeah.
Wherever it was. And we would do square dancing.
What fun.
After. That was the fun part.
You had ballroom dancing and then went down to the Grange
and square dancing.
Great.
And we all stood line. Well, they helped us. They taught us how to square dance.
Now, when you're saying they, the members of the Grange?
Members of the Grange.
Because that was the big social club for farmers and their families in town.
Yes.
And so you must, that sounds like, you're the first person I know who danced square dance at the Grange. And that
Absolutely. We loved it.
Good thing to do.
There was a group of us that loved it.
And now you had music and ballroom dancing. Any other classes you particularly remember or things you did?
Well, I remember a French class. I think it was Miss Perry, because I was not good with French. Or languages, I really wasn't, but I couldn't. And then Miss Perry sort of liked Mr. Homans. Mr. Homans was another teacher. I don't know what he taught. I really don't.
What was interesting.
We used to laugh about the two of them. We all felt they were really
Kind of a romance going on of some kind.
Because she was always Miss, and he was always Mister.
The reason they were always Miss is that teachers were not allowed to marry
That's
in the
right.
1950s.
That's exactly right.
All my teachers were Miss and never Mrs. until maybe
I
the
forgot
60s
about that.
or so.
Yes,
Yeah.
I did. I forgot about that.
Yeah, but
It was
a
fun.
different time. As far as the auditorium in Forbes is the most beautiful, beautiful room. It has wedgwood and carvings, stained glass windows.
But you know, I don't remember that.
We'll have to take you there again. It's, I think, the most carefully made and constructed with no money at all held back. Frank and Fanny Forbes donated this to the high school to the town for $1. They gave the high school to the town for $1, and yet spent so much money to make sure it was perfect.
Another thing I remember about high school was I always would go into the woods and find things and make things out of everything I found in the environment. I liked to do crafts, and I made up things. So I went to, I want to call him Mr. Moore, but that wasn't his name. But he was head of mechanical arts, I think they called it. But they did woodworking and different things like that. And I wanted to do woodworking. So I don't know how I got to talk to Charlie Newton, who was in my class, and Charlie wanted to do home economics.
Wanted to cook and
he loved to cook. And so I said, I don't know whether it was Mr. Moore, I don't remember his name. But I went there and I asked him, could I join and do woodworking here? Because Charlie Newton wants to go to home economics.
And you wanted to go to industrial arts.
Industrial arts, I think they called it. He said, no, you can't come in. And I remember saying, like, why can't I?
It was only boys at that time.
It was only boys, but I didn't even think of only boys. I thought of the woodworking that I wanted to do.
Sure.
That was my focus. And I said, I remember almost crying, why can't I do it? And he said, he looked at me, it got very strange, and he said, because I swear too much, I don't want you to hear me.
Oh my goodness.
And that's what he said to me.
No.
And I had to walk out. And Charlie and I were very disappointed.
Charlie never got to cooking
No,
class.
and I made aprons and stuff, and I didn't want
I remember making a very baggy apron.
And I didn't want to make aprons. I wanted to do, and actually later on in years, I bought a chainsaw, and I was taught how to use a chainsaw. And I could cut a tree right down, and I used to cut trees.
Good for you. So
I
that's
did.
where your talent was.
I loved it.
Oh,
And I
great.
used to make bear houses, not doll houses, but bear houses out of tree trunks
Oh,
with my chainsaw.
so you would go out into the woods and find an old trunk, a big old tree,
Or we had, my husband knew somebody that knew a lot of people who wanted their trees cut down.
I see.
So I would give them the wood, and I would give them half, and I would take half. So sometimes I would make one 2 feet high.
So how
And
do
then
you
I
make
carved it.
a bear house?
Well, then I'd chisel it out.
Okay.
Buy chisels, and I have a whole bunch of woodworking tools now in
So
the
is
house.
it a tall, relative tall trunk with a great...
No, well, it depends on the wood. My first one was maple, and it was a good size, about this wide and about this tall.
And did you make a hole for the
I
bear
did.
to get in?
I chiseled every. Well, at first I would take the chainsaw and make lines, and then I could chisel it out, cut it, and do it for the floor. Actually, somebody that in Gloucester, there was a farm near where we first moved, and this fellow showed me how to use a chainsaw and how to, because he knew he thought it was wonderful that a woman would do that.
Sure.
Oh, I wasn't a woman, I was a young woman. And he taught me how to really look at a wood to do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I made a lot of them.
Good for you. Were there any bears around here
No.
in Westborough?
But I always liked bears. I didn't like dolls.
Much rather have a bear for a friend.
I didn't like dolls.
Good for you, Irma. We can follow a bit about after you graduated from high school. You went to Clark. You were interested in Tufts and occupational therapy. You became an occupational
Yes.
therapist. And then you married.
Yes.
And your husband's name was?
George.
George.
George Cohen, yes.
George Cohen. And then you moved to Gloucester. Or were you married in Westborough? Or
No.
Okay.
No, I wasn't. I went to Clark University here for a year. The bus driver, I used to take a bus to Clark.
Oh.
We didn't have very much money. And, I forgot to tell you, I did work here in town. I babysat so I could save all my money.
And do you have any idea how much money you made per hour?
No, because I'll tell you, I worked at Herman's General Store here in Gloucester.
Good for you.
I say Gloucester. Here I live in
Westborough.
Gloucester.
Yeah, in Westborough. I just remember babysitting for 50 cents an hour.
I worked for a quarter an hour.
And you worked a quarter. Now they get $10 and plus
Absolutely.
an hour.
I remember that quarter an hour.
Really?
I do.
You worked hard for it.
I worked hard for it. But I don't know. I worked a little bit more money in Herman's General Store, which I loved. I worked there Saturdays. And I did think he was generous to me. I think I got like $10. I was really rich then.
Sure.
Working with him. It took me, I lived it out, it wasn't an hour. I lived across the street, as I said, from the country club. But Herman's store, General Store, was downtown Gloucester.
It was.
Oh, I keep saying
that's
Gloucester.
okay. It's
I gotta
because you
stop
lived
it.
there a long time. Herman's, right? Where was it? Right near the Rotary, or downtown further? Do you have any idea? Or South Street, East Main?
It was a big store. It
Herman's.
was just before you get to the Rotary. I don't know.
What did they sell?
They sold men's clothing, mostly men's clothing, not too much women's clothing. They sold, they sold shoes. They sold
Children's clothes
sort
and
of
all?
gifts.
Okay.
Maybe children's clothes. I don't remember children's clothes.
And what was your job?
I just had to show people or pick things out. If they wanted shirts where they were, then I'd take their money, put it on the register.
Good. And making $10
I was
is-
wealthy.
Yes.
I thought I was very wealthy.
But then you had to pay your transportation to get to Clark and other things
And
like
the
daily living.
bus driver, I can remember him. He had sort of, he had a nice round face, and he was wonderful because he would slow it up before he came to me. I could see them coming over the hill because I was always a little late, and I'd have to run down. We lived on a little hill, and I have to run down the driveway, and he would slow it down so I could get down there.
What a
right
kind
on
guy.
time. He was wonderful.
This is off West Main across from the country club?
Yes.
Yeah. That's a kind person who said,
Oh,
I'm
that's-
not going to leave her in the dust. I'll wait for her running down the hill.
And that's why I said that, because I found people were very kind and warm, considering they did know that the Aronses were the only Jews in town.
You mentioned that. Can you tell me what you'd like to talk and share about being the only Jewish family in
It
town?
was wonderful in
And-
that the friends that I had all took me to their churches. They said, "You're going to come to our church."
No synagogue here at this
No.
point, or temple.
And we couldn't go into the Catholic Church
St. Luke's.
because only the Catholics could go into them then.
Oh.
Because later on, they, I can't remember, because some of my friends were Catholic.
Sure.
And we went into I went into the Congregational church a lot, because they had somebody there that I liked.
A boy or a girl?
No, it was the minister who gave a good...
Oh, you like the minister, as far as his very intellectual and stirring sermons,
and I
I'm
couldn't
sure.
get over it. But he was very warm and he was very warm and wonderful. And I went to the different churches in town. Oh, I did forget to tell you, because one of the ministers in the Unitarian Church, in the off hours that before I worked at Herman's, I would walk behind my house up to Emery's farm.
Oh yes, that's Lee Emery, who is a selectman here, select person here, and her, I believe it was Ed Emery, and her father had an orchard there.
And we as kids, there were a certain group of us, used to go to the orchard.
Mm-hmm.
And we could sit on the tractors and then take us around picking the apples. And then a couple of times they'd let me go on it. I mean, all of our kids would try this. The Emerys were wonderful.
Yeah.
They were wonderful people.
They still are.
And they would let us ride the tractors with them and then let us hold the wheel. It was really big time. And then on Saturdays, the Unitarian minister used to come up, and Mrs. Emery would make apple pie for all of us kids.
Nice.
And we'd sit and listen. Are you ready for this? The opera.
How lovely.
So Saturday afternoons, after all the work was done, we'd run up there and do all the work so we could hear the opera and Mrs.
Was this
Emery's
on the
apple
radio?
pie. It was on the radio.
And she made apple pie for you to enjoy while you listened.
All the kids.
How old were you? Were you high school at this point?
No, I wasn't.
Younger?
Just in middle school, you know.
Goodness.
And maybe a freshman in high school.
Well,
And I remember going up their stairs. The back stairs had stones like this that were put together. And you had to be careful not to hurt yourself, because one of the stones was missing over here and one was missing there. And I remember bringing my husband up to see the wonderful farm that I played in all those years. I said, be careful of the stones because you're going to trip. And he looked down. He says, well, these aren't fixed really great. I said, but that's the Emery's house.
yeah.
And we know where to step. And they never fixed anything like
And
that.
it sounds like you made a regular habit out of visiting the Emerys.
Oh, yes.
Because it was such fun. Did you ever pick apples in any of the orchards?
Yes, yes.
Can you tell me about that? I know that I talked to Jane Dunphy, who is 94, about your age. And
What was her maiden name?
I right now can't remember,
I
but I
see.
might be able to figure
Well, I
it out.
don't- yeah.
But she said that during the war, that there were very few men and laborers left to pick apples and to work the farms.
That's why.
And she remembers the Gilmore farm sending a card or something down to the high school and asking high school kids, would anybody like to earn a little money by picking apples at Gilmore Farm?
Yeah, we didn't get anybody from the Emerys. Maybe some of the kids did. I don't remember.
But
I never
yeah.
did. So
Did you
I
go
don't
to the
know.
Gilmore Farm though at all?
I
That
just
was
heard
up
the
on
name, but I
Adams
don't.
Street.
Yeah.
Because there was an assembly line, and the high school kids would sort and pack apples as well, and they would fall
I think
through
that's
the
why
holes.
I think I was younger. Excuse me, Fred.
Sure.
Is that because the barn had boxes where they stacked them,
Yeah.
and I used to pick apples, but not as a thing every Saturday when I go to pick apples. I would do whatever they tell me to do. Do you want to get on the track? Do you want to hay? Do you want to do this? Whatever was available.
Sounds like whatever is fun too.
Exactly. But the young people that I was with didn't earn any money.
They were young, it sounds like, rather
Yes.
than being older in high school.
Yeah, I think so.
Sounds like growing up on a farm sounds like very enjoyable but hard work too.
Hard work, exactly.
Do you have anything else to say about being the only Jewish family in Westborough? Because now it would be, I think, a very difficult thing with the feelings of
Exactly.
turmoil in the world.
That's partly why I say it, but people did refer to it, but we were never integrated into the community life very much. To me, I know a community where I live now in Gloucester. People know people in Lanesville. We know people in certain sections of town.
Sure.
We all integrate or participate. Certainly life is so completely different now than it was then.
But again,
But
if you're the only family, there wasn't much to blend in other neighborhoods
Right.
as far as
and
your own
we
group.
were farmers, which was different than the others.
Yes. But thank goodness you prospered even though after 53 it must have been. What happened after the tornado and your home was destroyed? What happened to your family? Did they
It
move?
broke up. It really did.
Yeah.
Uncle Ellie was all gone. And by then, Uncle Abe was, they were so devastated, my family. And Uncle Charlie used to come up to our house from the farm. He lived on the farm. And we were like 15 minutes away from the farm. And he would come up for a lot of times for dinner. You know, my mother would have him come up because he was not married. And that's what I meant in terms of, it was, the Aronson family was where we participated more. People, there was a Dr. Cushing who lived right on the edge of the farm, and he was a dentist in town. But people would say, he's Jewish, but he didn't marry a Jewish woman. I mean, you'd hear things like that.
So the prejudice felt a little bit underneath it,
exactly.
or anti-Semitism was a little bit
And we
there.
never questioned
But people were
anything.
friendly to
But
you, though,
as a
right?
kid, they took me to church. They said, come see our church if you don't have one, you know.
Oh, that's right. And you felt welcome in people's homes and
Yes.
friends and everything else like that, which is
As the
people treating each other like human
I
beings.
did have a large group that I was with. There were like 2 or 3 people, young people.
Do you remember their names?
Well, one of them was an Alice. I don't know. I remember Halloween would go, what we did Halloween.
Oh, what did you do Halloween?
We were
Irma?
bad. Oh, we were really bad. In those days, you would have
Excuse me
a
for a
bell.
minute. You were born in 1927, so we're saying about 1935 or so, when you're about 8 or 10, 37?
10.
Okay, so in
More 10
1937.
because my mother wouldn't let me go out at night.
And what class in high school were you?
I don't know.
Well,
Whatever class you go to. It's age 10.
basically it would be probably 60.
Middle school, something like that. 6th
Yeah,
grade.
no, I meant what
Yeah.
high
It was
school
like-
class were you? Class of
44.
44. You must have told me that. Tell me about Halloween.
It was awful. We were bad.
In what way?
Well, I don't know how I learned how to do this, but Carolyn Goodwin lived downtown, and she said, here's what we do. Outside of the house was a bell, and it had a push button. To ring the bell, you push the button.
Like a doorbell.
Yes.
That sounds right. Okay.
But I remember that bell, because we would put pins in that bell, and it would ring the bell, and would run away.
Yeah. And
So
would it
we'd
keep
go
the
from
bell
a-
running?
Yes.
Oh, my.
We were bad. We would go house to house doing that, laughing as we ran away.
Now, did you get dressed up in costumes like they do now?
Some did. I never did, because I had to walk from my house, which
Where
was
the high school is, yeah.
yeah, No, I mean, where...
Oh, the country club, right, near the country
So
club.
I had to walk downtown. So I never got anything dressed, just wore my regular clothes and would put those pin in and run.
So you were playing tricks rather than getting treats. Did you say trick or treat if anyone?
No.
No candy.
No.
Irma,
We were bad. We only rang bells all over.
If kids these days thought of Halloween without candy, they would know what to do.
Exactly.
So, good for you. It sounds like fun. Do you remember the library? You said you remembered it was.
I remember going. My mother was a reader.
Good.
As well as a sewer. And
I didn't know she was a sewer.
my mother had the first yard goods store on Route 9.
Oh my. Was that in Westborough?
It was in Westborough. She was the first store on Route 9.
The first store?
Yeah, the first
yard goods store.
Yard goods store.
Oh my goodness.
She was one of, and I at the time was working in Boston as an occupational therapist, and I had a vacation. I would have to work at the store because she would go down to Providence to pick up odds and ends of bolts, so that she did. There were bolts that she bought, different bolts, and she was wonderful. I remember she taught me how to cut the
How to use a sewing machine?
I mean, cut it, you do it by hand and stuff. But I would listen to my mother. She'd say, "Oh, Mary, don't buy that piece of cloth because did you know that your sister Beth, she bought that and she's going to make it. So you better get something else."
Oh my!
And she would do that for a lot of people.
She gave them advice on their clothing.
And then because she made clothes, I was the best dressed in high school.
Irma, that's a lot to say for a farm girl, I must say.
I was, because my mother would make me stand there and put my arms out, and she'd put everything on me. And
what was her first name?
Bertha.
Bertha Aronson.
Bertha Aronson.
And she had and you had to
stand there, and she loved sewing. She made fabulous clothes.
Oh. Did she? And she sold these in her store, did she? Or
No,
she made them for people? Custom.
No, she only sold the bolts of yard goods.
Yes, for others to sew.
To sew.
But
because then they would ask her questions, what type of pattern to get for this yard goods or fabric. This different fabrics she had.
And people made their clothes at home.
Yes.
Did you learn to run a sewing machine from her?
I did, but I hated it. I was more a woodworker.
Oh, good for you. You were defined role models.
I really
You were not going to be put in a little cabinet and say, women do that.
Well, because she, was sewing all the time.
Yes.
And all I can remember is sewing and ironing, that's all, and cooking.
And cooking. That's what women did in those days.
That's what they did.
I like to iron, and I don't think people do it at all.
No.
Even when I was working.
I don't iron now.
Yeah, well, the kind of
and
fabrics.
the fabric now is
very
wrinkle proof. So
I just remember cotton shirts with lots of wrinkles, and you sprinkled them with water or a sprinkler, right, in a bottle. And sometimes ironing still can be very pacifying and calming down.
She would listen to the baseball games ironing.
Yes, lots of radio going on, right?
That's exactly it.
Did you have any special programs you liked? Or?
No, I don't remember that.
Do you remember television for the first time? Or?
Oh, I was married with television for the first time.
When the first came? What
know.
Year did you get married?
I got married early, 1949.
Right after the war. Tough time to
Yes.
get married, yeah. And you do remember your first television?
I do remember. It was like this size.
3 inches or
I remember
10
it because
inches.
we met these Dutch couple, and we had them over Oh, I was going to school in George. We had a one-room apartment on Huntington Avenue.
In Boston.
In Boston. And we got our first television, which was this 12 inches wide, and it was on a stand. And they came, and we all sat and watched television. We didn't even talk. We were watching.
It was so exciting.
It was so exciting.
Things have
We bought the
expanded.
television because we decided that would be cheaper than going out and doing things. We could stay home.
Right. Can you tell me, did you play around the ponds and things? Did you go swimming at Lake Chauncey, for instance?
Yes, we did.
Could you tell me a little about that? Was there a...
Well, it was a sad thing. I can't remember his name, but one of the high school in our class drowned.
Oh. Was there a
And
dam?
I don't know if there was another place called Lily Pond. No.
There's a Hakamaka Pond, there's Sandra Pond, there's Lake Chauncey, and that's
I don't know whether it was Lake Chauncey
a mill pond.
or one of those ponds.
Mm.
And I was afraid to go into it.
I can see that afterwards.
He was in our class.
Lake Chauncey had been a dance hall when the trolleys ran out to it, and it was a big amusement park.
No, that was
gone by the time you came, I would think.
No, I remember going to that because it was so different than the pond. There was a pond somewhere that we went to swim.
Ah, not Lake Chauncey, though.
No.
Okay.
Because that was very different.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to dance there, I think.
Yes, it was a dance pavilion.
I remember going there and showing me as a student, but I never really danced there.
Okay. What it was it was built earlier by the trolley company to bring people out from Worcester and Boston and everywhere to come to Lake Chauncey to dance, a Nicola dance. And they say Babe Ruth came out and danced
And I remember seeing that.
in Westborough.
What I'm remembering, I'm so scattered because I'm remembering all these different things.
You're doing a great job.
As you say that, because it was such a wonderful, warm, beautiful place. And I remember the beauty. I was always touched. Westborough was very beautiful.
If you see it now at sunset over different ponds and the sky is pink and blue reflecting in the sky, or just walk, we have quite a few trails now that the Land Trust, Westborough Community Land Trust has established. So people can walk in the woods, which is just great.
Yes.
And it is a beautiful place.
It's a beautiful place. It was great growing up here. I just felt very comfortable, even though...
And you felt safe, Irma?
Oh, I did.
Great.
Yes. And the students and the teachers were wonderful. Everybody, it was comfortable.
Did you know of Annie Fales at all? She was...
I know exactly where she lived, on Main Street.
Mm-hmm.
She had a beautiful house.
Across from the library.
Across from the library. And we loved her. She was...
You do remember her?
I do remember her.
Oh, great.
Because she was lovely. She was so attractive. And she was always Miss Fales.
Well, again, they couldn't get married. But I was told that she baked cookies and sang beautifully. Do you remember anything?
No, I don't.
She was a soloist and organist at the Unitarian Universalist Church.
No, I don't.
And was trained, her trained voice and lessons in Boston. And according to one of the, maybe it was Bunny Perrin, who's 103. And she remembers actually having Miss Fales as a teacher. She said she was very kind, very understanding, a really good teacher. And the kids went to visit her house, and it always smelled of cookies baking, and she always had cookies for the kids and neighbors. So
that sounds like her.
Yeah, she sounded like a very kind, but very smart woman too. She became principal of that Eli Whitney School at the end of Parkman Street, And she could walk right down Parkman to go to
And
work.
you know, before I said I think I said I didn't remember the Eli Whitney School, but I do. I don't think I went there, but I remember the name when you just said it. That sounds very familiar to me.
It's right down Parkman Street from West Main and faces West Main. But yeah, Miss Fales has become beloved and always was, I guess, but she now has first a school and now a brand new school that has taken the place
She had a
of the first.
remarkable history.
Yeah. But her little logo is a hedgehog, and I don't. But Bunny Perrin, who is the older woman who had her, said Annie Fales' nickname was Bunny. Certainly not hedgehog, but I didn't know she had
And
a
she
nickname.
had a wonderful house.
Yes.
It was historic, I think.
It is. It's a Victorian, built in the mid-18 or 1880s or so, but lots of details and pretty.
Yes, it was very nice.
And it's still there.
Exactly.
That's what some of Main Street.
Because I could see it.
Some of Main Street and Church Street must look like you remember it in the 30s and 40s, because the houses there were built in the 1880s.
Yes.
And haven't changed, which is lovely.
They haven't changed.
You can walk around downtown Westborough and see many, many different kinds of architecture, and all very charming.
It was wonderful growing up.
Actually, I gave a tour last week for Westborough had a kindness week, which is very nice. As maybe you've heard of the Kindness or Connects or Westborough Connects. It emphasizes kindness in town. And it's been there for about 5 years. And they have a particular week called Kindness Week, in which they have stores sign on and they offer little things for the kids, treats for the kids.
Oh, nice.
Or to paint rocks about kindness and loving each other. And they put these little rocks around towns and things. So for the Historical Society, I did a tour of downtown, but it was just the heart of downtown, an hour's loop, stopping at different houses of famous people.
Wow.
And that was the day. They have themes during the week, and this was chalking the sidewalk. And so little kids drew on the sidewalk.
We did that, right. We did
in front of people's homes, like where Esther Forbes, who Johnny Tremaine was born on Church Street.
Oh, I remember Esther Forbes.
Do you really?
That name is very familiar.
Well,
I
she was a
think
famous author.
She lived beyond the farm at one point.
Well, she lived on Church Street in the great big, beautiful house. I think it's on the
It's Church Street by the corner of the
right in the
Congregational
Congregational Church.
I remember that.
Yeah. It's it's pretty just because of the different houses and trees. And when the kids were taking this tour with me, I had them count the hitching posts.
Oh my gosh.
There are 15 on Church Street with the ring waiting for a carriage to be hitched up. So the kids had great fun seeing that there are actually hitching posts on Church Street.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So it's fun. So I'm awfully glad you came back today.
I am thrilled. I really am. It brought back such wonderful memories, because when life happens, you don't go back and think about where you've been from. I mean, maybe an incident. Now I'm thinking of a wide variety of things that happened.
Well, it's kind of like a mosaic that we put together of your life today. And you may have thought, oh, just a piece here and a piece there. But what you did, Irma, was create a beautiful whole of many different kinds of stories, colorful and fun.
It was great.
And I learned a lot, too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was wonderful. I really loved being here.
Well,
as you can tell.
Yes, you love Westborough, and it's so delightful to see someone who has seen Westborough in many, many stages, and you still love Westborough.
And I love where I live today.
Good, in Gloucester. It's a beautiful place as well. You had the
Yes.
best of both worlds, I
Yes,
think.
it is.
Well, thank you very much for coming and
Oh,
speaking with us
thank
and
you.
telling us my Westborough history from
Thank you.
that. We've been lucky enough to hear the memories of Westborough growing up on the Aronson cattle farm, being a farm girl in Westborough, but having a great deal of spirit and ambition to become an occupational therapist by following her dream on the advice of her art teacher, and to go to Clark and then Tufts. So it's been an interesting life you've had, Irma, and it's been very, we feel privileged to have you here.
Thank you.
Okay.
I feel privileged too.
Great.
To meet all you people here. It's wonderful.
There's good people now.
Thank you.
Lots of people.